Alright, today I'm going to be doing a spark plug change on my 2013 Mazda 3 with the SkyActiv engine. Some of the tools you need for the job: socket extension, some dielectric grease, a socket with a 10mm socket attachment, some anti-seize compound. I'm going to use a torque wrench, although it's not necessary. Spark plug gap gauge. You need a 14mm spark plug socket, and this is critical, and this was actually difficult to find as I didn't have one on hand. And then obviously you need the 4 spark plugs. The ones that were recommended were the NGK laser iridium, and they are the ILKAR 7L11, product number 94124. The spark plugs were pretty expensive at $18.95 each, so the total cost for me to do this was $80 for the plugs, approximately $10 for the socket, and then the dielectric grease and anti-seize. Everything came out to about $100. So I'll see how long it takes, and you know, if this is a DIY project that you should take on yourself, or if it's just better to pay the dealership their price to do it. Of note, I already have disconnected negative terminal on the battery before I start. So first thing you gotta do is remove the plastic engine cover to gain access to the spark plugs. It lifts up on the front and then slides forward. Before I begin, I'm actually going to use some compressed air and just clean off the top of the engine a little bit so that when I take the spark plugs out, I don't get anything down into the engine. We're then going to take our 10mm socket and remove the 5 bolts located right across the top and one down low, which need to be removed prior to removing the ignition coils. Once the 5 10mm bolts are off, this bracket just slides off. Now each coil is secured with an additional 10mm bolt, which needs to be removed on each one. As well, you should remove the electrical connector. You can use a flathead screwdriver, but you can also just use your finger. So we're working from left to right across the engine, doing one at a time. And it's not that you can't do them all at once. It's just recommended to do one at a time so that no dirt falls in the holes once you, if you're messing around up top. So now we'll get our spark plug socket and our extender. So, a little bit difficult to see, but it is indeed ILKAR 7L11. And there's a side-by-side comparison of the old spark plug with the new spark plug. I did check the gap on the Mazda spark plug. It is the same as on the new plug. Prior to installing the plugs, I have put a very small amount of anti-seize compound on there. There's some debate on whether that's actually required, but I'm going to do it. And you're going to use your extension again, as well as your 14mm socket. And initially, you're just going to go hand tighten, and then we're going to use the torque wrench. I'm going to torque this to approximately 10 foot-pounds. I'm going to back it off a little bit because I've used the anti-seize. So in inch-pounds, it'll be about 120. Okay, I can feel it's made contact. I'm now going to use the torque wrench to torque it down to spec. So now I'm going to use some dielectric grease on the ignition coil itself, and it's just on the rubber surface on the outside, making sure I don't actually contact any of the electrical connections. Now we're going to carefully slide the coil back in. Make sure it's fully seated. Reconnect the electrical connections and reinstall the mounting bolt using the 10mm socket. We are now going to do that for the 3 remaining spark plugs. So the last thing we're going to do is reinstall the engine cover retaining bracket onto the 5 screws and using the 5 10mm nuts secure it to the engine. And now we'll reinstall the plastic engine cover. So my plan is actually to keep 2 of the old spark plugs in my glove box on this car, as well as this 14mm socket, just because it was pretty hard to find, and if I'm ever in a pinch, at least it'll be available in my my glove box. I'll know where it is. So the last thing I got to do now that it's all put back together is start it up and see how it sounds. So overall it sounds the same, with no knocking or misfiring. It didn't throw any engine codes on startup, so it seems to be fine, but I'll take it for a drive and make sure it's good to go. So it's been 24 hours since I did the spark plug change. I've traveled about 100 miles. I haven't noticed any change in the fuel economy on the vehicle's in-dash computer, like some people I've seen post online. The total cost of this was $115. When I called the dealership, they quoted me $160 for parts and $140 for labor, for a total of $300 plus tax. In this province, it's 5%, so the total would have been $315 taken to the dealership. Obviously, that represents a savings of $200 to do it yourself, and it takes about 30 minutes. So overall, I would say I would definitely do a spark plug change for a 2013 Mazda 3 with the SkyActiv engine. The only thing I would caution is actually putting the new plugs in, because they are torqued to spec. You're putting them into an aluminum head, so you do have to be confident in your ability to reinstall new plugs when doing this. But overall, I would say this is definitely a DIY project that you could tackle. It's about as challenging as an oil change, but the cost savings is quite substantial. Thanks for watching.